Hey there, everyone. How are you doing? How's life? Summer is upon us. It's been gorgeous weather and it makes me super happy. Feels like we're coming out of a season of hibernation, honestly. Like we were just winter into spring instead of spring into summer just because of all the COVID stuff. But I hope you're all hanging in there and doing great. Yeah. And if you're a loyal listener to this program, you know that I don't give a lot of negative energy into what's happening with COVID. I tend to look at this as more of an opportunity or an invitation, if you will, from the universe to step up and be more, feel more, not necessarily do more unless you feel called to inspired action. But I'm just so inspired by those who are showing up in big ways to help other people heal. And I feel the same call. So if you're one of those, you're going to want to stay tuned, especially to this episode. And also, I do have a course coming up that I'll be talking a little bit more about, a 4-week course that I'm super excited to launch about those who feel some kind of movement with wanting to set their body and soul on a course of stepping into their mission and purpose, whether it's healing or a business or just something that they feel called to do, and they just need some structure around how to do that. So watch for that. But I want to introduce to you my friend Kandy Graves. She and I were neighbors in 2012. And we've just stayed connected. We have a lot of mutual friends as well. And because we're both in the kind of this emotional healing space of helping people break through their issues and heal their emotions and family patterns, we've just always kind of spoken the same language. You'll see that or hear that, I guess, when you listen to our episode. But she's a pattern breaking energy therapist. And what she does is she assists her clients with subconscious reprogramming and epigenetic-focused techniques. And we'll explain a little bit more about epigenetics in this episode. But 90% of your behavior is driven by the subconscious. And so there's so much going on underneath that we're not even aware of 90% of the time that's driving what we do. She specializes in trauma recovery. So she's hypnosis certified with the American Hypnosis Association. She's done a lot with the Healing the Inner Child. She's a certified health coach, 13 Breaths to Freedom. And also, if you've heard of the Hawaiian technique, Ho'oponopono, she's a trained expert in that as well. So her website is asyouThinkYouAre.com. Listen as we go a little deep into this whole, like, the hot mess that you are, okay? Because there's no getting around it. And we are electrical chemical beings, and our unprocessed emotions are stored in us, and they hold a charge. So we're going to talk about ways to neutralize some of the past events that you've experienced, how to emotionally stabilize yourself and burn new neural pathways. You know, the past couple of weeks on this podcast, I've been talking a lot about your ancestral stories and what you're carrying in your cellular memory, what's been passed to you. And so we'll explore that a little more in this episode. Kandy, welcome to my show. We've known each other for a long time, so this is fun to connect in this setting.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's just dive in, because you're just this woman sitting on this wealth of knowledge around the hot mess that we all are and how we get past it. And I think that's where you and I really connected, because we were neighbors and we just started talking, and it was like, oh my gosh, both of us have this shared passion for getting into the depths of emotional healing and clearing out all the stuff we've inherited and all of that. But why don't you share with us, because our stories are uncannily paralleled. I mean, they're different settings, but they're variations on the same theme. So share with our listeners, basically what you've walked through.
My life story.
Yeah, your drama.
Like you always said, your mess is your message, right?
Mm-hmm.
Holy cow, what a mess.
Especially
right?
Your hot mess.
Yes, indeed. So, well, I was actually born addicted to a drug addict mom. And this was, 1961. So this was certainly not commonplace. And my mom was able to be addicted to prescription pills, because this was before the era of the computer, where pharmacies could track what one doctor was prescribing to a particular patient. Mm-hmm. So my mom had 5 doctors prescribing her her regimen, if you will, and it was quite a regimen. We took her to a care unit when I was in my 30s, and my job was to go to the pharmacy to find out what she was taking. And I won't go into the detail of what she was taking, but I will tell you that she was on 22 pills a day.
Wow.
So she had a pretty significant addiction, and she died in that addiction. She did die of cancer, but hooked to a morphine drip, which I find ironic. So yeah, that's kind of the short version. What direction do you want me to go with that?
Yeah, just the fascinating similarities that we share around
Mother's Day and
yes.
okay.
So, because we just had Mother's Day, and Mother's Day is a charged day for people for a number of reasons.
Lots of people, yeah, for lots of different reasons. So, I'm not really aware of my mom's addiction, even in my 30s when in my 30s when we took her to a care unit. It was the first time ever I said out loud with my sisters, "Mom has a problem." So, and I grew up in that. I was born addicted. So anyway, fast forward, and I'm married, and have 3 little boys. And like any good, husband or father, my husband wanted to have our boys honor me, and he wanted to honor me on Mother's Day. And I turned into, I fondly call this the Wicked Witch, the Wicked Witch of the West. I just, it was more than just not liking Mother's Day. I explain it with the title of a movie called Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I never saw that movie, but when I heard the title, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's it. That's what's happening to me. It was like this energy just welled up inside of me, and I really, really struggled to function. And I cried a lot, and I was not nice. Like, I was short and mean, and it got to the point where year after year, my husband started coming to me the week before Mother's Day and telling me, "Hey, could you please be nice this year?" And I would say to him, "Oh my gosh, more than anything, I want to be nice." But about 3 or 4 days prior, this energy just started welling up inside of me, and I really felt like I was at a loss. I didn't know what to do because I couldn't control it. And then, it would die down and go away after Mother's Day. So fast forward again, and I'm now in a program to, one, heal my own stuff while simultaneously learning how to assist other people. And I have a repressed memory surface. And that repressed memory, I had absolutely no memory of it whatsoever. And as it began to surface, I'm in the corner in the fetal position. I really, really, really was not handling it. And over time, I was able to fully heal that event. And what it was my mother attempted suicide. And I was 9 years old, and my sister, just older than me, was 16. So she could drive. We laugh about she drove the getaway car. But I helped her carry my mom out of the house. We walked past my dad, who was sitting on the couch, and he literally just turned the corner of the newspaper down, looked at us, and went right back to reading the newspaper. And, my sister at 16 had my mom under her arms, and I had her feet. And we literally just threw her in the back seat of our car. My sister drove, and my job, all my sister said to me was, "Help her." And I'm in the back seat sitting on the floorboards of the car with my mother, whose face was grossly swollen, and she was, purple, basically.
Mm.
Her lips in particular and her tongue were quite swollen. And so she wasn't getting enough air. And, nobody told me what to do. And I really do feel that divinely this was given to me. I put my hand in her mouth and I pushed her tongue down and over to one side. And I did that for the 15 or so miles to the nearest hospital.
And you're 9 years old doing this.
I'm 9. Yeah, I'm 9. And of course, we, like everything in my life, there was absolutely no conversation around anything. And so, we went to the hospital, we came home, and that was it. And in trauma, we just, what actually happens, well, I'll go into greater detail about what actually happens, because I have a current story I want to share with you with a client that I just worked with. So I want to save that for a minute. But anyway, so the way I tell this story is like Paul Harvey, the rest of the story. When this particular memory started surfacing, so many people asked me, well, gosh, okay, let's deal with the anger that you have towards your dad. And I just was like, never, ever, ever experienced anger toward my dad. I just did not. And what I realized later on as I worked through this issue is that little girl had a secret. And her secret was that she really wanted to just go sit by dad that day. And she wanted the day to play out however it was going to play out without intervening and saving her mom's life. There was a big part of her that really wanted her mom to die. And that was a lot. That's a lot. I don't care what age you are. But that was a lot for a 9-year-old to become aware of.
Yeah.
So I never had anger at my dad. I totally understood where he was that day. Here was a day, like so many other days, where the world, particularly our house, revolved around my mom, and there was just nothing you could do to please her. So what I didn't share before, and I'll share now, is that event took place on Mother's Day. So it was Mother's Day, 1972. And today I have total recall of that event. And I can talk to you about it like I'm reading out of a phone book. I don't have any emotion around it anymore.
Just doesn't carry the same charge. You have the memory of it, but it doesn't carry the same emotional charge.
Absolutely.
Because you've healed it.
Exactly.
So I want to stop you there for a minute, because I've told you this, that every year leading up to the anniversary. So I lost a sister to suicide. Most of my listeners know this. 15 years ago, she left behind 5 children, and we were close in age. We lived in the same neighborhood, basically. But leading up to the anniversary of her passing, because she passed mid-April, or end of April, I guess, I would always get a sore throat. And I didn't put it together till probably about 8 years into, the anniversary of her passing. And it was when I started learning it really and dove super deep into how we hold emotional memory in the body. And it was so interesting because the morning of her, when I found out she was missing, and everyone was looking for her, I had strep throat that day. And there are a lot of layers to, why people get sore throats and what thyroid means and all these things.
Sure.
But that particular day, I actually had a really, really bad sore throat. I had asked my husband to take my kids to school because I could barely get out of bed. I couldn't swallow. So I was already sick that day. And then we get this phone call that, that they were looking for my sister and that she'd left a note. So she had called me the night before and asked me to watch her children because she had an appointment. And I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I had this family photo shoot planned, so I wasn't able to watch her kids." But I didn't know what her appointment was, that she went to a hotel room and overdosed and left a letter and all of that. But anyway, I share this because I, at the moment that I had this trauma, which was finding out she had died that day, and already having this sore throat, and there were a lot of things I wanted to share and speak, and I remember just it hurt. It physically hurt, but emotionally it hurt. So I locked that in.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because I grew up with chronic tonsillitis. I have thyroid problems. My grandmother had her thyroid removed. My older sister had her thyroid removed. And I'm writing this book now called If She Could Speak. So there's lots of levels of meaning there.
Right.
But I think it goes the same as what you were talking about with Mother's Day. It used to not be my favorite day either, but getting that sore throat on the anniversary of her suicide every year, and then having chronic strep throat growing up, and then having, my foremothers, or, my ancestors having these issues with thyroid, it's like there is a lot of history there with that area of the body, speaking out, speaking my truth, swallowing emotion down.
Yep.
And it's a major energy center of the body. So I just want to say, the body always keeps the score. There's lots of things written around this. And I know this,
Sure.
like our body is like keeping score for us. And there's of our traumatic events and it shows up physically for us as an invitation to look deeper into how we get to the root of that physical issue.
Yeah.
It happens to be throat.
Right. And that's another one of our similarities, because I grew up with chronic tonsillitis. I completely had that chakra rearranged when I was 14. I got those tonsils removed. The adenoids were removed. Only 6 months ago, I was diagnosed with nodules on my thyroid. Now, the thing that's, and I, well, 10, 15 years ago, I was taking thyroid medication because my thyroid had just basically stopped working. So, maybe your listeners are going to be open to this, but for me, when I look at what you shared, and the fact that, and my sister too, the one that drove the getaway car, she's had thyroid issues from a very, very early age, and so it's just way more than a coincidence, right? It's a generational pattern, if you will, to try to get our attention that there's truth there that's been held, and it needs to find expression.
Yeah. And
to me, that's the message.
Yeah. So we are here today in 2020. We are pretty much the walking benefactors of all the ancestral patterns
Yes.
that went before us. And I had an episode last week with Polly who talked about healing your ancestral money story. That's only one ancestral story that we could have talked about. There are legions of them.
Yes.
From everything from phobias to, relationship patterns. So, because you teach epigenetics as well, that it's not just their physical DNA they've passed along. It's not just like their eye color, their skin tone, and their hair color, their body type. It's their choice, their lifestyle choices that got passed on, and their trauma.
Well, and the thing, just case in point. So, my dad that sat on the couch, a really, really tender-hearted man. He's both my parents come from a long line of alcoholics, and alcoholism and drug addiction is sort of the byproduct of a lack of connection, and it's a lack of emotional connection. There wasn't, healthy physical touch in either of their lives, for two very different reasons. But so there was heart disease is what my dad ultimately died of. And his father died of a heart attack at age 57. Going back from there, heart disease. And it's that then again, we're talking about the heart chakra, right? Where it's the expression of love and giving and receiving love and
right.
joy, energy, trust, those things that when you have something like addiction in your family line, it's that lack of connection. We just learn how not to do that sort of thing. And I know that you and I've talked about this idea too and I shared this recently about being cooked in a certain energy, because here, your listeners don't know, but I ended up with drug addict children, and so this was a head scratcher for me, right? I set my life on a very different path early on, because in my mind, my mantra was, I don't want to be like my mom. I don't want to be like my mom. And so here's my mom, the generation ahead of me, right? She's completely addicted. I'm not. I didn't use drugs and alcohol, like, ever. And then I end up with drug addict children. And so I'm looking at this going, okay, you can't tell me that I don't have a piece or a part in this. I knew this early on. And if you go to any 12-step meeting for family members, they're going to tell you the 3 C's. You didn't cause it, you can't control it, and you can't cure it. And I sat there every single time that was said, and I went, nope, that's not true. Now, I initially took way too much responsibility for my children's addiction. And soon learned that was way out of balance, and I needed to back off. But I knew I had a part, and it's just like putting a pot of water to boil on your stove, and then you throw in hard root vegetables, and then you throw seasoning in that water. That seasoning with heat and time is going to infuse into those vegetables, and those vegetables will soften. And you and I are cooked in that same way, in energy, in our families of origin. And so when I work with people, I'm always talking about family of origin, mom and dad and siblings. What happened in your family? And if they can go back further for me, that's bonus. But I could tell them what happened previously when they tell me what happened in their family of origin. And they think like I have a crystal ball or something, and I'm like, no, it's called generational patterns. They repeat until they don't.
Yeah, and the body leaves clues. So
yes,
it's so interesting because I find, it's exactly the same. As I think energy psychology is becoming more mainstream, and people are understanding things like epigenetics, neurogenesis, and all of these fields, these emerging fields in the medical community, in the science-based community. We're finding at the quantum level that there are patterns for stress, for gifts too. It's not just negative. Let's be honest. Like we inherit their healthy patterns and their gifts as well. So that's what's so magical about being a human right now.
Right.
That our souls chose this incarnation. Our souls are different than what our bodies have inherited. So no matter what ancestral patterns that are playing out in our DNA, we also have this spiritual DNA that's like, I can come in and do this. Let me have at it, right? I care about my lineage. I care about healing the world. So I've always said this, that the most powerful healing work that you do, because everybody wants to do a purpose and a mission, and relationships are super important, right? And our gift and our mission to humanity. But the most powerful healing work that you will ever do is for your own body, your own, what's living inside of you.
Yep. Yeah, we heal on 4 levels, right? Physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. And the way that I help people remember that is you think about PMS, it's PEMS. And we have to heal on those 4 levels. And the physical is often the last component that we heal. We typically start with mental, emotional, and spiritual is certainly the realm that I'm in. But yeah, and yeah, to speak to this idea of signing up, I remember the first time, because I blamed my mom for everything for forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's because I could enlist anyone into my story. Oh, you were born addicted to a drug addict mom? Well, oh my gosh, of course. How horrible, how awful for you. Well, what ended up happening is I'm looking at this and got lots of attention for the story, but then it ended there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I was just this person looking for connection too. And then I really was hungry to heal it. Um, and I wanted to stop telling the story. And I remember someone said to me, well, what if you actually signed up for her? Like, what if you had a contract with her and that the two of you decided you were going to come and she was going to show up that way and you were going to show up the way you've shown up? And it was like, predetermined, if we could be so bold. And while I don't know that that's true, just having that thought opened me up to the possibility that I could stop, I could forgive her finally and move on from blaming, and then really do some significant work.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a great point. I think too that we oftentimes look at our past and wonder, why me? Why this? Why that? And I've addressed this in a lot of my interviews, because everyone I've ever interviewed or talked to, for that matter, who is a healer or an influencer in some way or a leader, they had some really crazy or dark or dysfunctional pattern, whether it was in their family or in their own body, that they had to work through. And it was a gift. They now see it as like, that was the catalyst. That's actually what I would not be doing what I'm doing had I not experienced that.
Same.
I know. I love that your sons are in recovery now, and that the family patterns are shifting. And
Totally.
same thing with my family, because we are chain breakers, right?
Absolutely.
We said, yeah, we'll come down. We'll stumble for a little bit. We'll figure it out as we go. But it kind of, I think as mothers, we will place, or I see this all the time, I know you do too, that we would rather place our children's healing above our own.
Yeah.
So
I did. That was my motivation. I wasn't motivated for me, right? But I was staring right square in the eye the mortality of both my sons. And that was, I remember having this very conscious thought, not on my watch. This is not going to happen on my watch.
Yeah.
And initially I put my energy in the wrong place. My energy went into fixing and doing everything in my that was humanly possible to, quote, fix my oldest son. And I had a really powerful moment with him. He was 17. He'd been missing. He's 38, by the way, now. But he was 17. He'd been missing for 2 weeks. I had no idea where he was. Talk about anxiety and not sleeping and, all of the above. And he called me out of the blue. And, my knee-jerk reaction at the time would have been to just, lay into him and make it about me, what you're doing to me, right?
Right.
But I happened to be working on recovery, and I just waited to hear and feel what the right thing to say for him was. And he was asking for a ride. And there was every bit of my codependent being wanted desperately to go give him a ride. So in my mind, I'm thinking, no, I'm not going to do that. But I had this overwhelming prompting to go give him a ride. So I did it. I didn't discuss it with anyone. I just went and I did it. And I picked him up. I drove him from Provo to Pleasant Grove, which is, for local people, understand that. Everybody else, it's about maybe a 15-minute drive. Mm-hmm. And I had a captive audience, and I took accountability and responsibility for everything I could up to that point that I had become aware of. Because while I didn't want to be like my mom, I really was like my mom in so many ways. How was I not going to be? I was cooked in the very energy she provided. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't do everything she did, but I certainly had the same energy about me. So I just took accountability and responsibility. And this is what he said to me. Very sweetly, Mom, I never had to feel bad about anything I ever did. And I said, oh, okay, why? And he goes, oh, because you did it for me. Mm. And that felt like this really sharp, stinging slap across the face and cold water thrown in my face at the same time. The second he said it, I knew he was right. And I just said, oh my goodness, I see that now. And I want you to know I'm sorry. Now, he was 17. He is 38 today. On July 21st, he will celebrate 5 years clean and sober. So I got my act together long before the pattern ran through, him, and he was able to put together, sobriety a day at a time.
That's beautiful.
But yeah, he has 5 years in July, and my second son, who didn't use quite as long and started a little bit later, but he will have 10 years in June.
Wow.
Yeah.
So powerful. When you talked about your cooking your children unknowingly.
Yes.
It's like the frog in the pot. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
Like the frog boil, it could boil, but like the frog just totally becomes acclimatized or whatever to the water as it gradually increases in temperature to the point where it's not even knowing that it's boiling.
And it's getting cooked and dies.
And one of my favorite sayings is, you are the water your children are swimming in.
It's so true.
It's so much pressure to put on us as mothers, but it goes back to what I'm saying. Number one, women are the climate controllers in the family dynamic, in the home, if you will. Yep. Women in general, it doesn't matter if you're in a family, if you're married and have children, like we set the tone, we set the climate.
Yes.
But, it is a lot of pressure on us. So I don't want people to go to guilt. However, that goes back to what I was saying before, is the most powerful healing work you do is not for your children. It's not to make these great humans and raise these great humans. It's them seeing what you're doing in your body. It's the frequency you emit in your daily walk. And when you heal that, and when you change your energetic vibration. So let's talk about that for a minute. Let's go into trauma, because everyone's carrying trauma, and unknowingly we're putting out that vibe of, when we get triggered or we get into a situation that's really charged for us. So what have you found that,
well, I have a great experience that just happened, and
I can't wait. You told me you're going to share it, so I'm dying.
Yeah. So
you need to tell
when it happened, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. I'm going to share this with Cherie. So I have this client, and she has a 15-year-old daughter that's really been struggling in the pandemic. And, as 15-year-olds, well, we've all struggled, but a 15-year-old cutting them off from friends and, their social life, it's rough.
Well, I need to just interject something. That is the next wave of this pandemic, is the fallout socially and emotionally from what this whole COVID thing and the
100%.
sequestering and the social
Yeah.
distancing. Yeah, I don't think we realize.
No,
And that's why
and
these kind of topics are very timely.
it is, exactly. So this 15-year-old had done something to get her phone taken away from her. And she even agreed that mom taking away her phone was the right thing to do. But it was still hard for the daughter. The daughter got her phone back. And, as far as she was concerned, life was back to normal. But mom really struggled to bounce back. And mom sank deep into depression and she became suicidal. And her husband reached out to me and just said, like, she needs you now. So he brought her in, and this is what she's saying to me. So I get it. I understand that I should not be so upset about this. And she goes, it just doesn't match the situation. But she said, I want to die. And I told her at the outset that this event that was happening for her in present time was absolutely connected to an earlier age for her. And she said, I haven't even thought about my parents in this situation at all. And I said, of course not. This isn't going to come from your conscious mind. This is hidden in trauma. And so how it works is the prefrontal cortex, the thinking mind, goes offline when we're in a traumatic event. We go into survival mode, the reptilian brain, and it gets recorded and stored for us for later. And later always comes, always, right? Think about me.
But when?
Yeah, think about me and Mother's Day, and then let me tell you the rest of the story. But I want to pull from. So I am always, always, always looking for overreactions and underreactions, because that's a red flag that further investigation is needed. So obviously her reaction to, taking her daughter's phone and giving it back to her, and the pandemic herself, the mother, figured out was really, really bothering her as well. Wanting to die was certainly an overreaction, right? And then, so those affected by trauma have trouble living moderately.
Yep.
We vacillate instead to the emotional extremes. And so I'm always looking for that. So through a powerful alpha state technique, I took her back to an earlier age, and she had an experience come up for her. She was on lockdown as a 15-year-old herself, in trouble from a dad whose expectations were absolutely unattainable. She often felt defeated. She had the memory of self-harm in this experience also come back. And that was her link to wanting to die. So in this powerful technique, I assist these clients to find their voice and stand up to and speak out the words that they never would have been able to, right, in the moment. The traumatic event is seeking expression, and we're going to hide from that feeling by these various ways. We will act it out, medicate it, or shut it down. And so this powerful technique allows the charge, both magnetic and electric, because that's how it's stored in the body.
Yeah.
To
we are electrical chemical beings.
Totally. So I was able to help her go back to that and neutralize that event. But isn't that remarkable? And she had no conscious awareness of that. But here she was, 15, just like her daughter, in lockdown, just like her daughter, in trouble, just like her daughter. And she's going through it. It brought up the trigger for her, but she's literally not functioning because the expectations of her dad were ridiculous. She told me, she said, no, I had to be perfect. I had to show up perfectly. And if I erred even 3 minutes after 9 o'clock, still being on the phone, and the rule was she had to be off the phone by 9 p.m., even if she was getting homework from a friend, she was locked in her room.
Wow. So that might as well have been like a dungeon prison, like an absolute like PTSD level trauma for her to be in that setting, when it just looked so benign. Like, it's just your phone, it's your room, for crying out loud. We're not in a third world country here, you know?
Exactly.
So interesting. Yeah. Because, okay. So I know that you are really aligned with me in how you can break up the matter, that kind of matter that gets stored in the body, and it has this frequency and it has this charge, and it's literally taking up room in the body. It has a weight to it.
It does.
So how do you release and break that up? If somebody can't go to a practitioner, like, let's just say we're starting super basic here. Yeah.
The absolute best thing and the cheapest form of therapy is a piece of paper and a pencil, right? Or a pen. To write is absolutely vital to healing. Just whatever's there, start writing. It doesn't matter even what's there. I love this quote. It's by her name is Dr. Pennebaker, but journaling elevates the immune system and calms the autonomic system, smoothing out the heartbeat, breathing, and perspiration. Both our body and our mind benefit from journaling. And then as we freely write our thoughts and feelings on paper, the associative process of our mind goes to work, and feelings and images emerge, struggle to find expression, and so find their way from emotional muteness to emotional literacy. I love that.
I love that too. I love journaling, but some people hate it. And I wonder if it's just because they know their trauma needs released and they're in an avoidance pattern.
They may or may not be conscious of that, but that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. So words are powerful, obviously, like writing them, saying them. I know affirmations, different things. What about like meditation? What have you seen with that for releasing trauma?
Well, what I find is I love meditation, and it's very, very powerful. But I also know that in 20 years of doing the work that I've been doing, it's repeatedly folks that have trauma really, really struggle to meditate. And it's just a fact, right? But it's because of these in the old days, we called them somatic markers. And literally in brain mapping, scientists have been able to find these little blips along the neuropaths. And those blips or nodules or knots, whatever you want to call them, are the magnetically and electrically charged and stored memory around particular events. And the work I do is utilizing the meridian system. We're able to go in and literally neutralize that nodule, the marker, and blow it to bits, very similar to how a laser obliterates a kidney stone, right? But then the energy of that event, the bits of matter that it's comprised of, gets blown out to the edge of our energy biome. The old days, we called it the auric field. and from there then gets blasted out into the ethers. And so yeah, I mean, obviously find a good practitioner. I'm raising my hand. I love the work that I do.
Yeah, and we will direct people to where they can find you. Do you do sessions over Zoom?
I do, online and in person. Yeah, and obviously with the pandemic, I was
kind of threw a wrench in things. Yeah.
Well, I was glued to Zoom, and my local people just met over Zoom versus coming in. So,
but it's so interesting to me that at the quantum level, this is completely science-based. I mean,
totally.
We can literally see that infinitesimal matter. I mean, some of it our scientific instruments can't measure, but like you can't, if somebody is having a PTSD level, kind of trigger response,
meltdown,
like a veteran from the war, like we can't take blood and find that memory. We can't see it on a CAT scan.
Exactly.
So it's energy. And so breaking up that energy, it's the only thing that's going to release it.
The only thing. Yeah. And, Einstein said, everything is energy. That's all there is to it. Match the frequency of the thing that you want, and you can't help but get that thing. And of course, that's the $1 million question. How do I match the frequency? Well, one way is we're going to burn new neural pathways. So, and here's the thing. So if you have an event like you have with your sister's passing and my Mother's Day story, without neutralizing that, we get pulled down that neuropath. We literally get pulled back into that line of thinking over and over again, finding ourselves there and not knowing how we got there. And I know lots of people can identify with that. It's like I was trying so hard to stay focused, and the next thing I knew, right? And we really do. We kind of become unconscious, and the next thing we know, we're just back in that pattern. And it's because those events magnetically and electrically pull us into that neuropath, that line of thinking again and again and again. So we have to neutralize the event. And then in doing that, we have a new thought, a new idea, and now we're burning a new neuropath so that we can have a completely different response.
I love that. And it's so, the way you describe that, it's so visual. It makes sense.
Good.
And, and it's interesting how you talked about meditating can actually trigger people.
Yes.
Because when they start to go to a still point or they start to go into a calming response, they're so used to being in fight, flight, or freeze that it's unfamiliar. And they are literally, their brain thinks they're going to die or that they're not safe.
Right.
And
well, so we really should mention homeostasis. And homeostasis is, now the definition I absolutely love. The definition of homeostasis is an innate drive to stay the same. So we have to have a conversation around this topic, and we have to mention homeostasis because what happens is this is how we end up choosing a mate that feels comfortable. It feels familiar. And if you look at the word familiar, it has two root words in it: family and liar.
Oh,
and
man.
that's because what's familiar to us is the generational pattern, the inherited lie, Cherie. That's what's going on in each of our families of origin.
And I just got the chills, literally.
I know, right?
That just resonates.
Yes.
So many illusions, so many lies we've inherited, so many ways of doing things.
Right. So that's how we end up perpetuating the pattern, because we're not seeking a mate to fall in love, although when it's so physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually a match, it's because of this familiarity, the family lie. It's because of the generational pattern. It feels like home. Marianne Williamson said it, and drawing from, A Course in Miracles, she said it. It feels like love. But what it is, I can be myself with this, quote, myself with this person. I can feel comfortable with them. I don't have to go too far away from my comfort zone, my homeostasis. The pattern can continue to play out with this one. And so that's why we pick it. I have 3 older siblings. They all 3 married alcoholics or an addict. That is so not a coincidence.
Yeah. Well, we are emitting a frequency of, I need to heal this pattern. So I need to attract somebody who can put it right in my face and help me look at it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's talk about, because I know you and I are really aligned with like the connection between health and flow. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So, what I think help me understand what you're
just how,
to.
I think we overcomplicate healing, but really what it is at its root is just flow through the body. So like if you have an emotion that's stuck, well, you can't experience flow. You can't.
Right. And so, so anciently, the Chinese discovered these meridians in our body, and they literally are troughs of energy. And when I think of a trough, I immediately go to the rain gutter regatta. I raised 3 boys. Can you tell?
Yeah.
and these, these boats followed through on these little rain gutters, these troughs. That trough of energy flows throughout our bodies. These events in our past literally dam up the flow. We are damned unless we heal and clear that energy, so that the flow of energy, or qi, that the Chinese refer to, which is just energy, it can now flow. So, Mother's Day can come and go, and I actually get giddy with excitement over it. And the connection I have with my kids on Mother's Day is such a contrast. For literally, it was decades that I was bogged down with this this painful memory, and so it literally can free us up to have a completely different experience.
So interesting.
And one way to understand and know that you have blocked energy, that you have stuff, because I know there are plenty of people going to hear this and go, well, I have no conscious memory. Well, remember, I didn't of that particular event either. But what you do is you take a step back and you look at your results in your life. What area of your life, physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual, do you feel stuck? What pattern can you find that continues to emerge? And while you're at it, look at the positive things that you've got going, because that's going to be very, very helpful to draw from as well. So being able to see the pattern is absolutely vital, and that will help you to know, I got something going on there, something stuck.
Yeah. And we're always like, however we incarnated into this earth life, it really did set the stage for how we were first introduced to life early on, is how we saw life throughout the rest of our, days, years.
It's true.
And we're always making decisions about ourselves because of the things we've walked through. I think it's really hard for people, and I include myself in this, to separate the family dynamics and the experiences and the darkness and the trauma really from who I am.
Absolutely.
And coming through, and this is why I started even doing Women Seeking Wholeness, because that's what we're seeking. We want to feel whole. We want to know that at our root, we are divine, and that no matter what we've walked through, no matter how much emotional debris we've collected throughout our years, that it's really about like being in this body to break it up. It's just, we're already whole. We're already intact. We're just breaking up what's in the body and in order and flow.
Totally. And it's once we have an awareness, we are halfway there. Literally, it is 50% of our healing is to become aware.
I completely agree with that. And
Yeah.
I think that's actually, I mean, I need to have you back on because I think we could go down a lot of, I would love to do an episode just on addiction because I get asked about that a lot and I have it in my family lines. You do too.
Yep.
And I think that would be just a fascinating thing to explore.
Absolutely.
But thank you. This was really fascinating. And I love that you offer resources and tools to people. You have quite an extensive background and expertise. And it feels like a lot of it is about you going into the subconscious and also using words and neuro-linguistic programming and just getting to the root of it for people. And that's powerful work. So I honor you for that. And
thank you.
Just thank you for being you. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Remember that even though you may have a hot mess inside of you, you yourself are not a hot mess. You're a glorious being. You are divine and you have immense gifts that seek expression. And as soon as you realize that, it's almost like the hot mess actually melts. It's crazy as you step into who you are and you have a knowing around your path and your soul purpose. And of course, that's a work in progress for all of us. But when you own who you are at your core, which is whole and intact, it's almost like all the emotional debris and all the past trauma and all the wounds that you carry find healing. They get put in their proper place and perspective. So that's my wish for you, my friends, this week, is that you own who you are, that you are not a mess, that you are actually whole.